Japan has an election every 4 years in order to decide the ruling party. But what if I told you that Japan has had 8 elections in the past 20 years? 8 times 4 is 32, so we should be in 2032. The math clearly doesn't add up. The last time Japan had an election at the end of a 4-year cycle is in 1976. As a matter of fact, this is the only time Japan's election occurred as planned since adopting the post-war constitution in 1947. So what's going on? Why does Japan have freaking elections? This is only possible because of snap elections. But before I dive more into that, I need to quickly define parliamentary systems, or else this entire concept will not make sense. Japan uses a parliamentary system of governance, which merges the executive and legislative branch. Basically, the two institutions that enforces laws and make laws are merged into one. In presidential systems, these two institutions are separated. The defining aspect of parliamentary systems is the method of election. In parliamentary systems, citizens vote for a political party. The political party with the majority in the parliament, or the lawmaking body, gets to choose a leader to serve as prime minister. There are usually 2 chambers or locations where politicians serve, but the lower house gets to choose a prime minister. Therefore, the party that controls the lower house gets to select the prime minister. This is why political parties play a greater role than individual politicians in most parliamentary systems. Countries like the United Kingdom, India, and China are also parliamentary systems because the lower house decides the country's leader. Just like any other presidential system, parliamentary systems also have term limits as elections are to occur every few years. However, most parliamentary systems provide the prime minister the power to call for earlier elections. This is called snap elections. Snap elections basically dissolve parliament or forces all died members to lose their seats, which then results in another election. The prime minister can only dissolve the lower house, not the upper house. In the Japanese constitution, the prime minister can call for snap elections only in the 2 following scenarios: the emperor calling for dissolvement, or if the prime minister gets impeached. Although Article 7 of the Japanese constitution specifically points out at the emperor's role, the prime minister can advise the emperor to dissolve parliament. In other words, the prime minister calls the shots and the emperor will approve these decisions. So basically, the prime minister can dissolve parliament if he or she believes it must be done. Even if impeachment fails, the prime minister can still call for snap elections as a gesture to allow the citizens to decide his fate. Once parliament is dissolved, elections must occur within the next 40 days. After this election, the 4-year term starts from day 1 again, which basically resets the entire term. Anyway, ending a term prematurely is a bit risky because there is always a possibility of losing an election. This happened in 2009. Nonetheless, here are some benefits of a snap election. For example, the prime minister can avoid political scrutiny by calling for an election. The prime minister can also increase his or her legitimacy by asking citizens to vote based on a single policy. For example, in 2005, the prime minister dissolved parliament in order for citizens to show their support or disapproval of privatizing Japan Post, which offers postal, delivery, and banking services. The prime minister could also increase the number of seats in the lower house if he or she feels like their party will win. This usually happens when the approval rate increases. Prime ministers dissolve parliament even if they have power because an additional election may expand the number of seats under control. In Japan, 66 is the magic number. By controlling 2/3 of the lower house, the party can override any potential veto and also push for constitutional change. As a matter of fact, as of June 5, 2023, there are rumors that Kishida might dissolve parliament. The recent G7 summit in Hiroshima has boosted his approval rate. At the same time, ongoing tax debates has been putting pressure on Kishida. By ending his term prematurely, it not only places media attention on an upcoming election, but also allows Kishida to extend his term in relatively favorable conditions. And that's why Japan's election years never follow the 4-year cycle. Do you think that snap elections are fair and truly democratic? I would love to hear your thoughts. Please like the video if you learned something new, and subscribe to learn more about Japanese politics.